My name's Justin. I'm the residential sales manager over at Sandbox, so thank you guys for having me. Wanted to do a quick little presentation here just on some updates on the residential solar industry. I do see some familiar faces around, so some knowledgeable folks in here. So thanks for attending, guys, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions at the end. So kind of our agenda a little here. Basically, an intro to Sandbox. We have been in business coming up on 10 years now. We are based just around the corner over here. I know a couple folks have been over to our office. So we do have our office and warehouse just about a quarter mile away here. So a little background on us. Ian, our co-founder, was on the board for a while. So yeah, big advocate for this group here. So thanks for having us attend. Coming up on 10 years now, we mainly focus in on residential solar. That's kind of been our bread and butter for the last several years now, but we are branching out to small utility scale, commercial projects. We are also very proud to announce that we are looking into heat pump assessments and conducting in-house installations for pilot programs for us internally. So trying to branch out into that sector as well. It's brand new for us, but a very exciting opportunity. We are based here out of Fort Collins. We love the community here, do everything in-house for all sales, permitting, engineering, installation, kind of a one-stop shop from start to finish. So we do have a very knowledgeable team for installation, everything along those lines. So can help everything out from start to finish for you guys for a lot of the information that we're going to get into here today. Obviously, typical straightforward solar installation, and then branch out to batteries, EV charging, and then eventually heat pumps and things like that too. Kind of a PV 101, very basics, just how solar works in general. Obviously, I have solar panels up on the home, converting from DC to AC electricity with either a string inverter or microinverter, which obviously powers energy in your home. That will then hit the breaker panel, and then any excess energy beyond that feeds energy to the electric meter, sends it back to the utility grid where you can disperse that energy throughout the community, help out your neighbors as well. I'm sure you guys are well aware of a lot of the different benefits of solar in general between environmental factors or financial factors. Helps out quite a bit on the residential scale, rooftop solar, helping get away from your carbon footprint, things along those lines, and then obviously helping out your wallet as well between federal incentives, local incentives, net metering programs, everything along those lines. So you can reap the benefits on a daily basis, and then over the course of the lifetime of these products. I mean, we're looking at products right now that are 25 years is what they're rated for. So this is also a long-term benefit as well. So great products straight across the board here. Does increase the property value of your home. We do have an awesome little website that we've been using for years now for, it's called pvvalue.com, which you can go in, put your home address in there. You can search this exact area to see how it affects the market here in Fort Collins compared to, let's say, Austin, Texas. That's going to change the value of putting solar on your home, things along those lines too. So some great resources available. So what I really do pride ourselves on for us internally is we approach every project to customize your project to your exact needs. We don't do any cookie cutter projects. So this is an example of our sales proposal here. So we will take a look at your home, your energy needs down here to see how this is going to fluctuate for you throughout the year, size the array properly for you based on current consumption, and then planning for the future as well, like we were talking about with heat pumps, and everybody's trying to electrify their home. So getting you set up now in local jurisdictions have done a great job. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that we were capped at about 120% years ago. That has been extended here in Fort Collins up to 200%, or like Excelos 200%. So everybody is giving us a little bit of a buffer and leeway to help plan for the future to make this a well-rounded project for you, so it benefits you in the long run as well. We've got the graph here. Look at your monthly utility bills. Try to size everything for both winter and summer consumption. So it's going to fluctuate a little bit throughout the year, but balance out towards about 100% as we usually start off the conversation, and then critique it and customize it for your needs from there. A couple different products that we're currently using. We have the REC 420 watt panels. These are rated for 25 years for product and performance along the same lines with the NCRES microinverters. This is kind of our bread and butter package. Highly recommend this for several different reasons here in town, especially for any shading issues or anything along those lines. And then obviously a big proponent of the NCRES products just in general. We've been using these products for years, great technology. So that's what we would highly recommend, but again, customize it, critique it for your exact needs. So NCRES has their own microinverter system, their own batteries and EV charger. I know they are trying to come out with bidirectional EV charging systems for vehicle to grid systems and things along those lines. So that is opening up a whole new world of technology and capabilities as well. I know a large discussion here that we're going to be looking at on the residential scale, obviously today and for the foreseeable future, is battery technology. Batteries have come a long way in the last several years. The new NCRES batteries themselves are rated for 15 years, which that was unheard of just a couple years ago. So that is going a long way there. I know we're based here out of Fort Collins, so everybody knows the utility grid here in Fort Collins is extremely reliable. There's rarely any outages here in town, but I'm sure we've got some people around here from Excel territory or PVREA territory on the outside of town where the grid power does go down a little bit more often. That is the number one priority of batteries at the moment, I would say, is just peace of mind during power outages. I know on the west side of town, Excel is shutting down their grid more and more often for high winds, for protection from the grid, fire safety, things along those lines. So that would be the number one priority that we usually recommend for customers would be power outages, safety during power outages. From there, you can use the battery on a daily basis as well, of course. So we can program the battery, and how we usually set it up is to match the home's consumption, meaning you can pull from the battery capacity rather than pulling from the utility grid. So if you guys are familiar with the time of use rate structure here in Fort Collins, in the afternoon you have peak rates, so you can pull from your battery capacity and avoid the grid as much as possible to avoid those peak rates. And then you do, of course, have battery arbitrage as well, so you can also program the battery to discharge during those peak rates to gain credits, higher credit through the net metering program too. When we do program the batteries and set you up, we typically look for a couple different scenarios, whether it be critical loads situation or whole home, meaning you can isolate certain smaller loads during a power outage that you absolutely want backed up. This usually helps to prolong your battery capacity for longer outages. Or you can do whole home backup where you have the capability of utilizing any of those loads during an outage, but highly recommend, of course, turning off certain breakers, conserving energy to prolong that capacity. And then, of course, the solar panels up on the roof with the newer microinverter technology and things like that. You can use that production throughout the day if it's a bright and sunny day. As long as the panels aren't covered in snow or anything, you can use that production to feed back into your battery. Keep that cycle going on for a longer time as well. I know I briefly mentioned it a little earlier, but planning for the future. Obviously, everybody's trying to electrify their homes, so we are trying to become a one-stop shop to help you plan for the future. We do have our own electricians in-house, so we can take care of any electrical upgrades, EV charging, renovations, and things like that. You want to increase the size of the array to plan for future needs, try to get ahead of that as much as possible. And then again, we're just getting our feet wet in heat pumps. We have not tapped too far into that industry just yet, but we know that's the next wave of technology, as Pete mentioned. So Ian, our boss, he's a huge advocate for it. So really trying to dive into that market here soon so we can tap into that. Just a general overview of net metering. It does get pretty complex when you look at different jurisdictions. If you're on a tiered system for your rate structure, or if you're on the time of use rate structure, of course, depending on when you push and pull energy from the day, if you push energy back during an off-peak time period, you get an off-peak credit versus the peak times in the afternoon. So depending on your exact situation, that's where we can customize the system, set everything up, especially including the battery to benefit you as best as possible. Yep. So yeah, it's similar to the graph before, the picture before. Basically, solar production is going to feed loads in your home first. If there is a battery in play, it is going to recharge the battery as the next step. Any excess energy beyond there, you feed it back to the grid as you would on a normal basis and gain those net metering credits too. Current rebates and incentives. We're lucky enough to live here in Fort Collins, where we do have local incentives that are set up. It is somewhat rare, I would say. There are just a couple other jurisdictions here around town, around this area, I should say, that do have local incentives, but Fort Collins is phenomenal, really trying to push and be at the forefront of that. So definitely grateful for those guys. Depending on the size of the array, up on your roof or on the ground, of course, you could qualify for up to $1,000 here locally for the PV system by itself. And then you can pair that together up to $3,000 for the battery capacity too. State of Colorado, you can get up to $1,000 on battery equipment that's currently in place at the moment. And then as well as the 30% federal tax credit. I'm sure people are going to have some questions on that as that's a big topic right now. But yeah, currently everything's set up for the 30%. So it's really helped out the industry throughout the last several years. So happy with that as well, definitely. And then for us, next steps, if you guys are interested in getting a free quote, we can take a look at your specific home, customize it for your situation. So we do have some business cards up on the front desk there. We do have links to our website as well, so you guys can get in contact with us if you do want to take a look at a customized quote for you guys. Happy to help out there. We have expanded our team, so we've got 3 different sales representatives on our team now. So business is growing. I think we're at 30 employees total throughout the company. So Sandbox has come a long way in the last couple of years, growing pretty rapidly and looking to hire even further as well. Yes, sir.
I see some solar implementations on houses in my neighborhood that are on the north side.
Yes, sir.
What kind of ROI is that?
It is not attractive.
Even west or east?
It all comes into play because if you have a battery, that eastern production in the morning is extremely beneficial to help recharge your battery from the night before. Western production is great for offsetting peak rates through time of use. We do not recommend north side installations at all. We've driven around the area and they are due north facing with a steep pitch. It's going to ruin your ROI. We do not recommend that by any means. So it's unfortunate there are other companies that come in for that quick and easy sale, but yeah, we've taken a look. It could double your ROI, your payback period and everything. We typically see about anywhere between 8 to 12 years, depending on jurisdiction. But yeah, on the north side, that could drastically extend that ROI. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
So walk us through a little bit about go to a residential facility and the roof is kind of so-so.
Yeah.
Did you recommend they replace the roof first, or what? Tell us a little bit about that.
The way that I always approach that, if I were going to a mechanic, basically, I always approach it, and we always, because we're not roofers ourselves internally, roofers will come out and do their free assessment. I always have the customer ask the roofer, is this an immediate concern? How long do I have left in my roof longevity? Is it 6 months? Is this 10 years? If it is anywhere beyond a couple of years, I would say you can reap the benefits of solar for the short term with local incentives and federal incentives and things like that. So we do advocate for moving forward with the project sooner rather than later, I would say.
So if you let's say you've got a customer who's installed the panels, and the project is done, it's 5 years later.
Yep.
and the roof is kind of deteriorating.
Yeah.
Can we contract with you to remove the panels, or what do you recommend? To take the panels out, let the roofers do their work? How does that work? Tell us a little about that.
Exactly. We call it detach and reset. So we will come out, remove the panels from the roof and store those on site. Let a roofer come out and put new shingles on, and then we come back out to reinstall everything and get you back up and running properly again.
Is that real expensive?
So usually we recommend going through a homeowner's insurance claim. When you register the system with homeowner's insurance, your premium may increase on an annual basis, I would say. And typically, depending on the system, it could be anywhere between $25 and $125 annually is what we see. But when it goes through an insurance claim, there's no out-of-pocket expense. If you do out-of-pocket, I think our pricing right now is set up at $293 per panel. So depending on the size of the array, that can obviously get very expensive pretty quickly. So, yep.
Just to let you know, after the hailstorm in Bertha this summer, I had to have my panels taken off and put back on. It's 6.5 kilovolt, it's 7,500.
7,500.
Insurance paid.
Okay, good to know. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a great southern exposure, but it's a stone-coated steel.
Yep.
I haven't found anybody that would put solar panel panels.
There's 3 different types of stone-coated steel materials that Decra. They do have the way that they install those roofs is they kind of layer it. So if it is a certain type of material of Decra, basically we have to cut out a section of the shingle itself to find access to input our racking. There is one type that has a nail at the very front of it that you can pull out the nail. We can slide our racking underneath there to secure everything and then go along with the normal.
These are screwed in direct to deck.
Okay. I think we may have to take a quick look at that on site and get close-up photos of it, but we do install on Decra stone-coated steel roofs. It just depends on the material specifically. Yeah.
The first one I found.
It's we've heard that quite a bit actually. We get those calls pretty often. So, yes, sir.
Where are production rates doing right now? How are production rates holding up? The city has increased their rate structure for residential. What are production rates?
Production rates as far as
Solar.
for the amount of projects going in. I mean,
What's the city going to pay me for a KWA?
it depends on the time that you send excess energy back to the grid. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, so the time of use rate structure in the afternoon, I think it's 24 cents per kilowatt hour compared to what they charge you is like 27 cents per kilowatt hour.
Still that high?
Yeah, it is a decent payback. It's better than most other jurisdictions, but not exactly a 1-to-1 ratio. Yep.
Just looking at half a dozen years ago,
Mhm.
they were predicting that the production rate would drop
Yeah,
severely. And I guess it has.
it's still pretty attractive here in town.
Officially kept up.
Yes, yeah, it's still pretty attractive here. Yeah.
You know when you're actually set up to be selling it back to the grid. Like I just recently bought a house that it came with solar panels.
Yes.
So, how do I know? Is that set up like on the install or?
Yeah. So there's 2 different types of monitoring systems. You get a production monitoring system to see how the array is producing and functioning. You get consumption monitoring to see how much you're using in the home. So you get that net difference there, which is what you're sending back to the grid for overproduction. It should show up for like a negative line on your billing statement to show excess credits that you're getting excess credit for. So is your original installer still in business? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was like 12 years ago.
Okay.
I did say I found the work order through the city.
Okay.
And I think I remember looking them up, and I just think they're still around. It wasn't y'all. I thought you're new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they're still around?
Okay. I would reach out to them first, but if they're not around, they can't help out for whatever reason, we do have our own service department, so we can come out and do a system checkup to run through diagnostics, make sure it's running properly. In that way, we can also try to look at monitoring system. Technology has progressed quite a bit over the last 12 years, so may have to explore a different route, to be completely honest. But yeah, theoretically, there are different systems out there that you can see all that information.
So that was my next question, that is, from 10 years ago, how many companies are still around?
Absolutely. So we've been in here for 10 years. We have taken over a larger part of the market share because I'm not sure if you guys remember EcoMark here locally. They went out of business. That helped us out quite a bit because our service department, we took over a lot of their business for system checkups and things along those lines. Namaste out of Boulder is one of our bigger competitors. Obviously, they're solidified in the market space here in Northern Colorado. So that's another name that comes up all the time. But you see some smaller companies come up here and there. But I would say we've been around on the longer side at 10 years. You've got some young companies.
So you say there's about 2 now that are reliable?
Me personally, I would probably recommend 4 companies between here and Denver that we come up, a reputable company, they're competitive and everything. So
My neighbor had that nightmare with each
yeah,
halfway installed.
absolutely. Yep.
It's,
We've heard that come up quite a bit. There's a lot of fly-by-night companies that are nationwide, or they come in from out of state, do a lot of business, and then they disappear. With anything else, I would just Google local companies and look through all their reviews for reputable companies, companies that have been around for a while, and go that route. Absolutely.
So Justin, we've read a lot about when you're feeding back to the grid. I've been reading that there's some concerns about the utility providers, that their infrastructure is inadequate.
Absolutely.
Take us through some of the things we do here in Fort Collins to check in with our Fort Collins utilities on the distribution side to make sure we have the capacity to even apply for net metering. What does that look like?
Absolutely. That is a growing concern in other jurisdictions, and we haven't heard of it too much here locally, I would say. There's a whole fiasco in Excel territory where they, over distribution, their grid was not set up for that because it was put in place decades ago, of course, where we had to go through secondary reviews. I'm not sure if you saw on the news where some customers would be installed. They would not get permission to operate to turn their system on for 3-6 months because they were doing secondary reviews. And especially as you see on the outskirts of town where a lot of homes are popping up in small congested areas, that's more of a concern there, but it's more in older sections, I would say.
So you pull a building permit.
Yes.
Take us through that. Does that include the review by the Fort Collins
Yes.
utilities?
It's called the interconnection application. So we highlight what we're proposing from a production standpoint, kilowatt hour or kilowatt sizing of the array, everything along those lines. So they are well aware of that before we are even able to install. We're not.
There was a concern there.
Yes.
And then in the case where there was a concern, does the homeowner have to pay for that, or how's it work out?
We haven't had anything here locally. The secondary review on the back end for Excel, which was a nightmare for everybody, I think there was a $200 fee. That has, it's not as much of a concern anymore, and that's where batteries come into play as well. That's helping out their utility grids quite a bit because you can store energy rather than pushing everything back onto the grid to overwhelm their substations and their power lines and everything like that. So, yep. Yeah, Pete.
Sorry, that's all you're. So going back several years ago, those have been around a long time, we had a number of presentations on smart home technology. It's what you're basically managing your home to basically avoid both time of use and just if you had solar during the day. Is NCRES or any of the other inverter manufacturers looking at kind of that larger energy management aspect of saying, okay, especially when you attach an EV charger and you have to think, okay, when do I want my EV charger to charge? I'm blazing sun, I'm not using any load in the house to charge the car, versus, and so on. Are you hearing on any of that through NCRES or any of the other?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with NCRES specifically, Their EV chargers can actually scale based on your solar production. So they have a certain amperage threshold, of course, but if you have a bright sunny day, south-facing roof, just wide open for production, you can use more of that energy to feed back into your vehicle to charge at a faster rate. Along the same lines, there are span smart panels. So they have smart breakers where you can, the amount of technology that's going into those products right now, it's phenomenal. So there are different manufacturers and different technologies coming out to try to disperse that energy in a smart manner, I would say.
Colorado just doing the same thing.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah, a lot of technology. That's the next wave of the future, I would say. Yes, sir.
My wife hears about these issues with fires and batteries and all that. Does this really increase your insurance costs, or what can you do to mollify my wife?
Absolutely. So Enphase batteries, it is a lithium iron phosphate battery technology. So technology has come a long way for safety purposes in general. It comes into play where you are mounting those batteries to. The new fire regulations have come into play with battery or basement installations where you're around gas lines or water lines. We usually recommend placing the battery in the garage. And then the new batteries are rated for outdoor use as well. So depending on the company and policy, like I've heard State Farm doesn't increase their solar premiums at all. I think it does change a little bit with batteries as well. So, yep. Yes.
So on technology, you mentioned like the bread and butter panels and batteries that you use. Have we like sort of plateaued on those types of things, or are you like waiting for the next thing to happen, the next breakthrough on those, or fit more smart homes?
So technology is always evolving, of course. We have slowed down. Everybody is kind of a race to the highest wattage for larger solar panels on the residential scale, where they are crossing that threshold a little bit towards commercial, what we saw 5 years ago with commercial ratings, where there are new panels on the market now that are 460 watt panels, 470. So that is growing pretty quickly. I think the efficiency of panels has plateaued slightly. And a lot of major manufacturers are shifting towards home batteries or bidirectional EV charging as well. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, bidirectional EV charging is where you can basically plug in your vehicle, power loads in your home during power outages and things along those lines. So that's more of a pilot program in Europe at the moment. It is coming to the US, and that's going to be, I would say, the major breakthrough in technology in the next 5-10 years or so.
Truck does that.
The Ford Lightning, things like that.
Most EVs don't do that.
No. You do have to have, for this example here, these are Enphase batteries here on the right side of the screen. This is called a system controller. So this is an auto transfer switch. So basically it's a safety mechanism. If the grid goes down, that way you can isolate your home from backfeeding energy onto the utility grid so you don't hurt somebody by electrocution or things like that. So there are additional components that are going to be involved with bidirectional EV charging. It's not just the straightforward charger that I have here. That's a basic model, I would say. So there are additional components that you will need, but yeah, it's going to be phenomenal technology. Once it's on the large scale, yeah. Yes?
Do you exclusively use REC and Enphase, or do you sometimes use other?
We've used different manufacturers throughout the years, kind of tried and true technology, great reputation, longevity of the company. That's why we have stuck with these guys. I've been with the company for 6 years, and we've used those all 6 years that I've been here. There are specialty situations where we've got a customer up in Red Feather Lakes or something where they want to plug in a generator as well as a battery and the PV. So we have definitely explored different technology, different manufacturers, but this is the more simplified, straightforward route to go. Yep. Yes?
Justin, speaking to the manufacturer, inverter, battery combo, I'm aware that some manufacturers of inverters don't allow the rate arbitrage. approach, specifically Tesla.
Yep.
And some others.
Yep.
Based on manufacturer settings.
Yep.
And where they're being installed in the country. I wonder if you could just speak to the technologies that you use, and maybe even just like you have the 3 different settings. Like,
Yep.
in your experience, what do you see customers looking at from like, hey, set me on arbitrage and I'm gonna go for it, or like set me at 80% state of charge and backup only.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna be good there. I wonder if you could just talk through a couple of those things.
Absolutely. What we see in most settings is self-consumption. It's a little bit more of a benefit to where you pull from the battery capacity rather than full arbitrage to push it back to the grid. A lot of that comes into play with what net metering structure you're on. Other structures will give you pennies on the dollar, so it doesn't make sense to push all that capacity back onto the grid. And then you can usually go down to like a 20% depth of discharge is where we usually set it. So you can use that on a daily basis. And then they have new, it's like storm watch technology where if there's a storm coming in, they will stop discharging your battery to hold that capacity in preparation that the grid goes down. Different manufacturers have different, slightly different settings. What we see most is the self-consumption, or like a savings mode is what they typically call it. That's definitely the most popular. That's typically a little bit more beneficial because the utilities will take out an additional charge sometimes for sending energy back to the grid. So I think the whole point of batteries is to basically isolate yourself from the grid as much as you can. You want to be self-sufficient. So using the solar production on the roof, you've got the battery there. You rely on the grid as little as possible. So that's the starting point in the conversation we usually go through. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Do you know which battery incentives are available for new battery system on an existing solar?
Yes. Same incentive should apply. You should have local incentives through City of Fort Collins. Excel has incentives in play right now. As long as the solar array is feeding the battery to charge it and you're not charging directly from the grid, all incentives should apply. Yeah. Yeah, Frank.
I was giving a presentation this past week on the electrification, and I was challenged by one of the audience members that installing batteries in the home created an additional fire risk, especially in wildfire situations. I was wondering if you could speak to that, because I really could not address it, whether that was accurate or inaccurate.
Absolutely. There are safety mechanisms in these batteries right now to shut down for safety purposes, of course. So while the technology has come a long way, I would say there is a slight risk depending on the setting that they're in. The technology, if it gets too hot or if it gets too cold, it shuts down to save itself so it doesn't damage these mechanisms inside. Obviously, if you are, and what we install, we can't put it in front of a parking space, let's say in your garage, because it's an impact zone. So safety purposes there, trying to put it off into a corner, utility room, things like that. Yes, technology has come a long way. I would still say that there is a slight fire risk. It's not from the technology, the chemistry, just setting itself off right there. I think that has to have a spark with like an impact or something like that.
But to your knowledge, has the insurance industry reacted to in-home batteries as an increased fire risk?
Yes, I have heard certain companies and policies have increased their premium a little bit. USAA, State Farm, I have heard they don't, in certain situations, increase the premium. So there are some variables there too. Yeah. Sir.
When sizing the system that you I think mentioned in the presentation that the City of Fort Collins allows you to install what 200%.
Correct.
Average use. And that's up from 120% where it had been.
So it used to be capped at 120%, but yeah, you could go all the way up to 12 kW, and then beyond that, that's when they take into account for 200%.
Do you know if Fruta Valley REA is bumping theirs up as well?
That has been a discussion for a little while now. They are still capped at 120%. Excel and United Power, they just bumped up from 120 up to 200% within the last 3 years or so. So all major utility companies are shifting in that direction. When we look at smaller utilities like Town of Lyons or Town of Estes Park, they are still capped a little bit smaller for just the capacity that they can handle. But larger jurisdictions around here are increasing that threshold.
Justin, could you explain that in layman's terms? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Understand what?
So basically, 200% cap is based on your annual consumption. So when everybody is electrifying for the future, they can take into account what your historical consumption has been, and they will allow you essentially to double that. So when you size the array, when we take into account the production of the solar array itself, we have to stay underneath 200% of what you have consumed in the past. Yeah.
So when do they re-rate that? How often do they re-evaluate that?
It is pretty rare, I would say. I know Fort Collins did it 4 or 5 years ago, and then a couple other companies have. They don't change that rate structure too often. I would say maybe any 10 or 12 years they discuss it. I know, what's that?
You can build up quite an account at 200%.
Yes.
At some point in time, they steal it. It doesn't, end of year, you're gonna have a come to Jesus.
They do have a true up period. So if you have leftover credits at the end of the year, City of Fort Collins does it at December 31st. They will give you the monetary value of that that rate right there. So you can't oversize the array and just roll it over for several years. And that's not extremely beneficial for the customer, to be honest. You don't want to oversize it that much because it's not, your ROI is going to extend and everything like that.
They still allow you to take credit and install your utilities?
Yeah, so City of Fort Collins, you can roll those over into stormwater, wastewater, regular water. They're the only jurisdiction that does that, though. Yep.
So maybe some solar, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
What rate for the net excess generation over your consumption? An Excel service territory, the 200% cap is gone. As a participant on the virtual power plant, there's no limit on how much you can install and how much you can make.
Okay.
Feeding Excel's grid. Now here in Fort Collins, it's a little different. If you have net excess generation, you're still capped. But what's the value of that net excess generation when they make you take a payment?
For City of Fort Collins, I need to do some more research on it, but I could have swore it's at 24 cents per kilowatt hour.
It's about 90% of the charge.
Okay.
So on-peak charge is 26 cents.
Okay.
The no metering credit would be 24 on peak. And off-peak, which again is about 85% of solar generation across the year, is 6 cents compared to 8 cents. Or it's about 90% of the total retail rate is what the net credit is.
And they get a check.
Just a credit?
It's a credit to your account. Again,
You can't get a check like Excel.
I'm not that far down the weeds on it, but I can follow up.
Usually what we do see when you have other aspects of your utility bill associated with that, any leftover credits are applied to stormwater, wastewater, regular water, so you don't drastically overproduce where you have those leftover credits at the end. I know they were sending a check years ago. I need to do some more research on that as well to see if they'll send you a check in the mail.
It's up for the kilowatt hours now under the new law with Excel. There's payments for power, capacity, ancillary services, reserves, credits, and any wires alternatives deferral. So there's like 40 billion in requested upgrades for Excel that are all on the table for taking by local capacity in Excel's grid right now. So it's a wild money-making opportunity. Like payback here might be 15 years. Payback under the new law on Excel could be 2-year payback for no matter how much you install.
Phenomenal. That'll make it so much more attractive, of course.
Return on investment.
Phenomenal, yeah. Yes?
So in Fort Collins, with the rate rate cap, like, what would you recommend for a percentage of your use? Was it, you wanna go 200% because in the future you're gonna put a heat pump in, but are you gonna use that, or purely to get the shredded?
So we do a custom analysis. So let's say if you're planning for like an EV charger in the next year or so, I would absolutely recommend putting more panels on the roof to offset that. If you are looking 5-10 years down the road, it doesn't pencil out nearly as well for the customer to drastically oversize it. That's going to extend your return on investment as well. So we do have that conversation with each customer. I typically would say around, depending on what your expansion projects are, around the 150% is going to look the most attractive in most situations. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So tell us a little about your business case for getting into the heat pump business. What's the attractiveness for both you and the client?
Absolutely. Reducing your carbon footprint, of course, with going towards electrification. You can use the solar production to offset the electric consumption of your heat pump. There are incentives in place that make that more attractive as well for the consumer. So next wave of technology, we really feel that is going to skyrocket. So it's a great market to tap into. A lot of new exciting products coming out, extremely efficient products that are rated for at least 25 years as well.